can put the screen back up. My wife's up in Canada because my mother-in-law broke a hip a while ago. So I left my 16-year-old daughter at home, and yesterday they were predicting a super outbreak of tornadoes. And it seems to be going north of Wichita, so that's a nice thing. We're happy for that at this point. Wichita, Kansas, of all places. I just want to kind of share a little story, and I don't have to be quite so frenetic as last time because I don't have so much to say. But there's some important lessons, and so let's begin with a word of prayer. Father, we are pleased and humbled that we would have any part to play in your work. And Father, when you give special indications of providence and blessing, we enjoy that very much. So I pray that you would continue to be with each person here, lead and direct minds, and may good come from all that's said and done, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, as it so happens, I was working in Wichita, Kansas as a teacher at the Three Angels Church, which may not mean much to anybody up this direction. You may recognize, some of you will recognize two of the names. When I went there, the pastor was a fellow by the name of Don McIntosh, and the head elder was another gentleman by the name of Phil Mills, Dr. Phil Mills. That's an interesting crowd to run with, for those of you who know those gentlemen. But anyhow, I taught there at their school for 6 years, and then one day, I was actually preparing a presentation on Adventist history. I was supposed to speak out at Advent Hope out in Loma Linda, and I used a statement, and I don't even remember where it's from right now, but I used a statement from Ellen White. It said, "Entire consecration to God is an influence which is felt by all with whom we come in contact." And I don't know if I'd qualify as a midlife crisis or anything. I'm trying not to reach the middle of my life ever, but I was going into my 20th year of classroom teaching in a variety of different places, up in Canada, down in Oklahoma, and Kansas, and it just made me a little retrospective. And I got to thinking about the students that I've taught, and I have been blessed. I've been a part of some very good schools, and I have been, for any Adventist teacher, the joy is to watch the kids go out and remain Adventist and do something, And the vast majority of my former students are Adventists. I'm so happy for that. But the majority of those, they're not turning the world upside down. I was as much your idealistic teacher as anybody else, and I wanted to go out there and turn the world upside down. And I do have some students who are, and I'm thankful for them. Some of you would know Melody Mason. She's one of my kids. And Sunny Kim, now Arakawa, she's one of my kids. Some of you, and the Eller family, some of you know them in various lines of mission work and whatnot. And so I've had some kids that I've been really happy with. I've got students working in Mongolia and South America and whatnot. But the majority of them are like the majority of Adventists. And somehow the thought came to me and said, maybe, Dave, why don't you do something that will, by influence, work with the however many 100 kids that you've taught in 20 years. Most of them still like me. Other than that, they have good taste, but most of them still like me. And I thought, maybe I could actually do more for God's cause by setting an example than starting with a new crop of kids. And I kind of envisioned an alumni weekend type of thing where I'd send back an email that says, Clarissa and Stefan and I are here working with this Stone Age tribe trying to bring them the gospel. What are you guys doing? It was kind of like if the old geezer could do something, maybe we could too. And so I had that idea. So I turned in my intention, resignation, and I said, better find yourself a new principal. I think next year I'm going to do something different. Oh, what are you going to do? I said, well, I think I'm going to go overseas. Well, over the years, I've got a lot of friends that deal with that kind of thing. And one thing I found out is that if you're unemployed, a good way to change that is to volunteer. Lots of people will hire you on a volunteer salary, So I had more openings, there were more places I could have gone, and they would have happily taken us. But this is danger of getting too long. But anyhow, I never had the burden that this, this place or the Philippines or Ukraine or China or Bolivia, and there was nothing that was just, that was jumping up and down saying, this is the place, Dave, this is the place. And eventually it got down, we were running out of time, all the way through the school year. I'm done teaching school there. My contract goes for another month and a half or something, and I still hadn't figured out where I was going. And it got to the place where we were looking at mission service, and the only determining criteria we could come up with was which one's going to be best for our family. And that was so morally repugnant. Here I am going to go do this self-sacrificing thing, and the only way I can decide is figuring out which one's best for me. just kind of turned my stomach. And then one day, I was praying about this a great deal, and then one day, literally in about 40 seconds, I had a little epiphany. I was standing at the sink washing dishes. I always try to get that in. And I was thinking about all this, and I was thinking, why, it looked probably like we were going to go to the Philippines. So why am I leaving the United States? Not why am I going to the Philippines. The Philippines seemed like a great place. I loved what they were doing. It was a good opportunity and all that sort of stuff. I love all those programs. But, ever since I had 2 brain cells that began communicating intelligently about the time I was 16, and I was converted, my interest has always been the church in North America. It's always seemed to me, if we could light a fire here, it'll spread. And so and the Lord had given me different opportunities. I got to meet and work with a lot of different people over the years that gave me kind of an unusual advantage. And I thought, why am I going to the Philippines? And the only reason I could come up with for going to the Philippines was so that I could exert an influence in North America. That was my contribution to North America, was to try and inspire my kids. That's why I was going to the Philippines, other than whatever I might do over there. And then I thought, what if you succeed? What if I inspired 100 kids to say, wow, if they can do that, I can do something. What would they do? And this is not necessarily a logical conclusion, but my thought was, I suppose they'd all go to the Philippines. And North America would still be sitting here. And all of a sudden, the next thought was, somebody needs to show that the same principles that work, and I'll drop a few names here, but for say David Gates in South America, his extreme faith, you've maybe heard his presentation on that. I like that expression, so extreme faith. The same principles that work down there that work for Layman Ministry News, say in the Philippines and in Romania and some of these other places, the same. Do it because God said so, and just let Him take care of it, not irresponsibly, but just do it. said, somebody needs to show that that works in North America too. And then I immediately, and it was funny, all this is in 40 seconds, really. It was bing, 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 bing. And the next thing I thought was, I knew why it was hard to do in a technologically advanced, financially self-sufficient nation. Any of you know Gary and Neva Roberts? Okay, it's been, what, 3 years now? 3 years since their plane disappeared down in Bolivia, I think it was. No, I'm sorry, Gary. I'm mixing names. Norton. No, Neva. I'm mixing up two couples. I'm going to make it generic. I had some friends. I didn't know them well, obviously, but I had some friends who flew a mission plane down South America, and they disappeared. Been 3 years ago in March, I think, maybe 4. They thought they crashed. Couldn't find any evidence of it. 2 years later, they found that the plane's being flown by a drug cartel. It means they were probably executed in the forest. But maybe not, so you keep praying. You know? But mission service, bad things can happen, but it tends to be very kind of binary. You know, you get in that airplane and you take off, and you're either going to land safely or you're not. You know, boom, you're either kind of dead or you're still alive. You know, if you're walking down the trail, you know that snake is either going to eat you or he's not. You know, you may die of a tropical fever or you may not. But it's kind of, you know, in our minds, it's kind of binary. And when someone dies like that, you know, we say it's tragic, but it's noble. And, you know, I've said, you know, if their death at that airplane didn't inspire at least 3 young kids somewhere to say, I'm going to be a mission pilot, you know, then we're losing ground. You know, you got to be replacing the ones that die. But in our culture, if you do something unusual for God, probably nobody's going to kill you. What's going to happen is you're going to go drip by drip by drip. You're going to bleed to death financially. And you're going to end up living in a culvert someplace. And that's not noble. And nobody wants to embarrass the gospel. Nobody wants to embarrass themselves. So I just had that thought, you know, and then fortunately I recovered. And I said, you know, somebody needs to do it anyhow. And then the next thought was gospel, medical, missionary, company, evangelism. And it's a long story, but when I was 17, I moved into the home of a gentleman who had worked with J.H.N. Tyndall. And some of you will recognize that name and some of you won't. But he's the guy, I mean, he was the man that started gospel, medical, missionary, company evangelism. And I've heard those stories, and I've talked to people. I lived up in, you know, Brad and Candace Thorpe were here this morning. I haven't seen Candace for 30 years, but you know, ran Radiant Living seminars up in Vancouver, British Columbia when I was living up in BC. You know, I went down there with my buddy and spent the weekend with him, and I saw gospel, medical, missionary, company evangelism in practice. You know, and these other things, the Lord has just kept this kind of on my back burner, and I have an interest in history, so I kept studying it and looking at those kind of things. But I'd never thought of actually doing it. But now the thought was, that's exactly the project that needs to be revitalized for North America. That's what we were asked to do 100 years ago. How could, you know, how could we miss? Somebody needs to do that. And I was thinking, yes, somebody really needed to do that. And then, of course, you know, the obvious question was, so why don't you do it, Dave? Well, because I'm going overseas. And besides, I have no name recognition value, and I've been an Advanced teacher, which is, I'm basically broke. So, you know, how could I do that kind of a thing, you know? And then, you know, that's exactly the kind of petty, insignificant obstacles that, quote, unquote, extreme faith will just smile at and move on, you know? So I knew, I mean, it's like, okay, so what could I do? What could I do? And I got this haywire idea. I said, you know, maybe instead of going overseas, maybe completely out of the blue, the Lord would bless me with a job that allowed me to earn enough money so that I could do some recruiting and get 4, 5, 6, 10 say, AFCO graduates or, mission evangelism graduates or any of these, any of these places. Get some of these young 20-something single volunteer, they'll go off do a year of mission service and wherever, You wouldn't even have to buy a passport to come to Wichita. And I kind of liked the idea, even though I didn't know anything about it. So then I had the joy of trying to explain this to my wife, who's been planning on going overseas for 9 months. She bought that idea when I came up with it, and well, why don't we do something different, honey? I really felt pretty lame. She's the practical one in the family. She says, it's a good idea. She says, I like it. Said, but there is a problem. I said, oh, well, there's always a problem. Yeah, well, that's why I'm not going to do that, I guess so. So what's the problem? She says, well, you don't have enough bedrooms. You don't have any place to put these people. Well, that's true. 3-bedroom house, can't really house that many people. So I said, that's perfect. That's my fleece. I don't even have to worry about figuring out whether it has to be wet or not. The Lord gave me a fleece. All I have to do is, if He provides me a house, then I move forward. So I said, I will talk to a church member. Only guy I knew that was into real estate in any nature either. If he can find me a big house, I'm good. We'll go. Before I got to him, he got to me. Next Sabbath. He says, Dave, I want to talk to you. I have a question. I said, well, I have a question for you too. He says, you go first. You go first. And he stood there, and he just kind of looked at me for a second. He took a deep breath. He said, Dave, I've been an Adventist for 8 years. And the whole time I've been coming to this church, he says, I keep hearing talking about all this stuff about, health centers and country living and growing your own food and vegetarian restaurants and health food stores and lifestyle things, but nobody's doing it, Dave. He says, I don't do well with all the talk. He says, if it's worth talking about, it's worth doing. So he says, I'm going to start a health food store. He says, I'm going to start a vegetarian restaurant right here in Wichita. I'm going to get that going. He says, but he says, I don't know anything about it. He says, I'm a new Adventist. I love this line. I think he said it with absolutely no trace of irony. He says, I've only been an Adventist for 8 years. I haven't even read the testimonies yet. Let me put in a plug for the testimonies. Those books changed my life. Read those books. Squeeze in some time, Put the TV out on the front porch with a sign that says free. And then get a, they may not pick it up, so put one that says $25 on it, and then they'll come along and they'll buy it, and then you give that to their offering. But read the testimonies. Great books. Anyhow, so he said, I haven't even read the testimonies yet. He says, I don't know how to do this. I don't really know anything about this. So I've been praying for the last week, Dave. He says, I've been praying. He says, I run a construction business. He says, I don't have to know how to do everything. If I need Schedule 90 concrete, I don't have to know how to pour Schedule 90 concrete. All I have to know is how to hire the guy who does. So I've been praying for the last week, Lord, who would actually know anything about this stuff? And he says, your name is the only one that comes to mind. I've been thinking, but I know you're going overseas, but are you going to be here for a week or a month or something? Can I hire you to help me get this thing started? Oh, and by the way, next Wednesday, I'm closing on 164 acres, 65 miles east of town. That can be our health center. And I'm thinking two things. First thing I'm thinking is, what did this poor innocent guy ever do to deserve the headaches he's going to inherit? I've spent my life on Adventist institutions, and I'm just thinking, oh man, this poor innocent man. But the second thing I'm thinking was, if you take his idea and combine it with my one little piddly idea of a few Bible workers, it's not a bad start. It's not a bad start. It's not the whole package, but it's not a bad start. And so that's what happened. Actually, my contract expired at the end of July, and on August 1st, I started working for him. And we put together a restaurant. And let's see, I think I may have to, did that kick it up? Oh, that's in the wrong spot. Let me do this. Oh, no, it's actually in the right spot. My apologies. That's what the building looked like when we started. Now, the gentleman is a real estate developer, and that was his building. So that was an advantage. So we started in trying to fix it up and turn it into a restaurant. That's the outside shot. There's the sign. Do I have any Greek scholars here? Let me tell me what sozo means. It's the root word. I'm not a Greek scholar, but it's the root that's used for both salvation and physical healing. So when thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save, that's sozo. And go in peace, daughter, your faith has made you well. That made you well, that's sozo. We thought it was a kind of a nice name for a health food store, restaurant type of thing. And so it took us 1.5 years. The Lord blessed all sorts of things, getting the pieces together, and we got it up and running. There's one of my former students, actually, serving out a variety of the house specials. Veronica Jenkins, our chief Bible worker and waitress. The way we had this planned was all these young Bible workers were going to be there, and it's an amazing thing. Someday I hope to ask the Lord some questions. The Lord told her a year in advance that she would be going to Wichita. And she had no idea why, how, what for, or anything. She was working as a Bible worker down in Arkansas, helped raise up a nice church and got it going. And just at the time they got them on their own feet, somebody gave me a recommendation, and I called her up, and it worked out. So she's been living in our home. That's the one thing the Lord never gave me, was a bigger house. Still in the same house, but Veronica's in what used to be my office, computer room, storage, closet, everything else. And at our peak, I had, 2 girls living in the living room and 2 boys living in the garage. It worked out pretty well. The garage kept the rain off, and then we left the garage door open, and we put up a tent to keep the mosquitoes out. So it was good. That's the beautiful thing about these 20-something kids that have been in these call porter programs. They're tough. You can abuse them, and they love it. Yeah, so this is the restaurant. You can see big open kitchen. The public really liked to be able to see where their lettuce, was bouncing around. This is Jordan Fowler, AFCO graduate, Bible worker at Three Angels for quite a while. He became a good baker. That's my wife and daughter and myself standing there by the counter in the kitchen, ready to roll. This was shortly after opening day, I guess. We started getting a lot of people in. It was good. We had cooking schools. We had a very talented chef. The Lord blessed there. I would argue probably about the best chef in Adventism. He fully trained French classical chef who had worked under a guy by the name of, I've forgotten the name, long I haven't rattled that off. Jean somebody, anyhow, he's the only vegan chef to ever win the Cordon d'Or, which is the highest award in French cooking. And our chef worked under him for 2 years, so he actually really knew what he was doing. This is a cooking class, mostly non-Adventists. We did kids cooking classes. That was fun too. I don't know if you can read it there. A little go tract, right, for all the publishing people. I have to put in a plug here for publishing, and it's kind of the thing that provides the ammunition for everything else we can do sometimes, So there's nobody talking about canvassing this week or this weekend, and that's not. I trust that implies no neglect, but keep them in your prayers too, and support that program. That's the end of my pictures. General observations. What did I find working in the restaurant? Number one, I found that nobody ever argued with us being Adventists. Actually, I should have put up a picture. I guess I didn't get in there, but on our sign, it gave our hours, and it just said, closed Sabbath, parentheses, Saturday. And I was surprised how many people would walk in and say, oh, so it's like you guys keep the real Sabbath or something? I'm thinking, well, yeah, well, what do you do? You know? And nobody ever faulted us. Nobody ever, I mean, when we first started, I envisioned it as being this kind of a stealth operation, you know, where we're going to be running this great restaurant, but kind of down underneath, you know, there's going to be this spiritual influence. Everybody knew within, like, you know, whatever, and nobody cared. We got no negative publicity from that ever that I could find. We actually ended up being the second, only in all of Wichita. Wichita has more restaurants per capita than any other major city, if you want to call Wichita a major city, in the country. We have one restaurant for every 13 members of the population. That's insane. Now, most of those are fast food, greasy, gook, you know, heart attack specials. But Wichita loves restaurants. But nobody ever complained. But out of all of that, we were the second kosher restaurant. And so we had a lot of Jewish patrons. They came and certified us, you know, put a little sign on the wall. It was easy talking to people. You know, some people are these relentless extroverts. And some of us aren't. You know, and I'm a pretty strong introvert, actually. I find in a classroom or in a setting like this, I can be, you know, I can look almost bubbly, like, you know, it's because I'm enjoying myself. I'm having fun of it, you know. But, you know, other settings, it's hard for me to talk to people. It's just not my thing, you know. But a restaurant provided that opportunity because they expect some conversation from their waiter or waitress, you know. They expected to talk to you. They gave all sorts of opportunities. They had all manner of discussions. The health work was well received. We had a lot of people attending our classes. It helped to have a really good chef. The media was kind to us. We were featured on television several times and all the newspaper magazines and things and whatnot. So that was a plus. The literature on the tables never offended a soul. You know, if anything, I think we underexploited. We were too cautious in taking advantage of the opportunities. But I did learn some other things, and they play into the discussion here. We'd built the restaurant, I don't know if you could see that, you know, it had that big counter and big open kitchen and whatnot. We actually built the restaurant with the intention of 8 to 10 staff, and about 6 of those being waitresses. We designed it with some deliberate inefficiencies because we wanted contact. We didn't want to self-serve anything, and we're not just here to serve food. We're here to get to know people. And that worked out pretty well. Our business plan included these volunteer Bible worker 20-somethings. And it actually was working pretty well for about 9 months. And then I learned something. And, you know, Ellen White is really wise. She often said these things about having business people running businesses. Probably if I'd been a little smarter, I would have known this. But I learned something. I found out that it is technically, completely, totally, unarguably illegal to have a volunteer in a restaurant. I didn't know that. But the nice lady from the federal government explained that with great clarity. And she reserved for her right, courtesy of the statute, duly signed by the president, no doubt, the right to impose an $11,000 per day retroactive fine. Now, it's not that they're against volunteerism, it's that they don't believe that anyone would volunteer in a restaurant. And if they're not volunteering, that means that I'm paying them under the counter. And if I'm paying them under the counter, they're not getting income tax. And that's really where the concern comes up. So all of a sudden, 9 months in, I had to shed a lot of our workers. And all those deliberately designed inefficiencies, they were still there. and it created a difficult situation. So our solution to that is to not run a restaurant, run a culinary school, and actually provide training. Now, we had a chef that could, he could train. So our plan was to run a culinary school. We only served lunchtime, 11 to 3. And so the plan would work really nicely. You know, you have classes with half the group in the morning, the other half is doing the prep work, getting ready for lunch. You serve lunch period, gives everybody a chance to learn that angle, that aspect of it, and all those things. And then you're free in the afternoon and evening, which is when you want to be out doing your canvassing and your Bible studies. So I think there's a beauty in the plan. School could also be wrapped underneath our 501c3 much more readily than a business. So I would like to just as a hot tip, whatever, mull it around. Anybody thinking along those lines, you might consider a culinary school rather than a restaurant. And just chalk it up as a lesson learned from experience. And I'm wondering, my apologies here, I neglected to make preparation for this, but could the recording be turned off at this point? I'd like to say a few things that I don't want to be completely public. Is that okay? My apologies to the coordinators here.